health is really in the headlines at the moment. So I hope that I'll be able to enlighten you a little bit in my little talk today. But first of all, I just wanted to share something quite personal with you, because I think it's relevant and it very much relates to what Anita was just saying. And that is, you know, I noticed about myself that my off switch that was always there when it came to things like sugar and, dare I say, red wine, has disappeared. And I found myself, you know, just not being able to stop my sort of automatic behavior. And I found myself awake a couple of nights ago about 4 a.m. and I thought, what's going on? What is that? And I had a sort of a bit of a chat with myself and I thought, that's fear. Madeline, you are petrified. You're really afraid. You've started this business a year ago, great timing, you know, husband's business, very difficult times. The world in itself, there's just so much going on. And even though, you know, I'm in this business, that doesn't stop me from having those feelings of just being really, really, really afraid. So I thought, but what's good about it is that I recognize this. I recognize that that fear was causing that automatic behavior, and I know what to do about it. And that's what I hope to share with you a little bit today. So I'm just going to share a few slides. Let's hope this works. We've practiced. Which I'll just talk through a little bit to try and go through a little bit about the science behind kind of mental health and what's going on in your brain. So what I'd like you to do is a little exercise to start with. I just want you to close your eyes and I'm going to say a word to you and I want you to notice what comes up for you, okay? So I'm going to say the word meditation. Okay, now you may get an image, you may get a thought, you may get a memory, you may get some sort of judgment about what you think that is. Okay, so just notice that and then ask yourself the question, where does that come from? Where does that memory or that thought or that judgment about this thing come from? What's behind it? Okay, and it's just a question to ask yourself and just notice what comes up. And that's just a really quick way. You can open your eyes again now. Thank you for joining in. Just a really quick way to demonstrate to you this amazing faculty that the human brain gives us, which is different from the rest of the animal kingdom, which is this awareness, this consciousness, this ability to reflect on ourselves and notice what's going on. So, but the problem is for a lot of us, we're not doing that. We're just on automatic, and when we're living our life and having our feelings and emotions and, you know, exhibiting our behaviors, for most of us, we're just in what's called the emotional part of our brain and just reacting and responding to things. Now, you've probably heard the word meditation quite a bit. And if you Google image meditation, this is what comes up. And it's like, I kind of hold my head and go, why? I mean, I don't know about for you, I can't get into the lotus position. I'm rarely on a beach or up a mountain. To me, that just makes meditation look so inaccessible. It's just not a day-to-day thing that I'm going to practice. So I'm kind of on a bit of a mission to rebrand this whole idea. I call it mental relaxation. And I want it to become something that people just do like they would go for a run or go for a walk, look after their bodies. It's like a daily thing that you do to just look after your mental health. And for that reason, I do different styles of meditation that I think are far more accessible for people. So what I want you, I know that probably most of you have got this vague idea that meditation is good for you and it helps in all sorts of areas of sleep. But I want to talk a bit more about what's going on in your brains generally in life, so that hopefully you'll see the point of it a little bit more. So here we can now scan our brains and we can now see what's happening in our brains when we're doing different things during the day. So the normal awake state is hopefully the state that most of you are in now. I do have a bit of a habit of putting people to sleep. But the normal awake state is called the beta state. And that's the frequency of your brain wave that you can see. It's a little bit faster there. And it's where you're concentrating and kind of, it's your interface with the external world. Then if you relax and you're going into sleep, or maybe if you have in a hypnotic trance, or you're really sort of daydreaming in a really lovely state, then you go into something that's called alpha, which is a much slower brain state. And the great thing about alpha is that we can deliberately get there. It's like something that you can learn to do quite easily. And what alpha does is it takes you, it's a bridge then into your unconscious mind. So our conscious mind is a tiny part of our brain. Our unconscious mind is the bit of our brain that drives all our behaviors and has all these automatic reactions and holds all our beliefs that we may or may not be aware of. And just to finish, there's theta, which is a light sleep, and then delta, which is a deep sleep. Now, why is it useful to know this? It's useful because beta, we've actually realized, is split into 3 ranges. So there's a low range beta where you're sort of alert, and it's like when you're reading a book, you're doing something enjoyable, maybe watching TV. So you're sort of conscious, but you are relaxed. Then there's mid-range, which is hopefully where you are now, learning, listening, interacting, just dealing with life. But then there's this high-range beta, and this is the key to it all. This is where so many people are for so much of their day, and sometimes for many of us, the night as well. And this is where we get the problems, because this high-range beta, you may have heard the term fight or flight. I'm sure you have. This is the way our brains have developed to protect us, because when we woke up in the mornings for hundreds of thousands of years, we could face a life or death threatening situation any particular day. So our brains were set up so that if you were facing a life or death threatening situation, you were on alert all the time, you're on high alert, and when something happens, you get a big rush of adrenaline through your body and cortisol through your body, so that you can either fight and your muscles are strong enough, or you can run away. And that's where we're at. Unfortunately, life now, most of us, thank goodness, don't wake up and worry that we're going to die that day. But life has changed enormously, but our brains haven't evolved fast enough. So we're in this state where our brains are trying to protect us by being on alert all the time. But actually what they're doing is it's to our detriment, because now the issues that we face, which are more general in terms of we're kind of thinking about the wider world, which, our ancestors wouldn't have known anything about. Worrying about finances, about jobs, just the day-to-day, if there's way too much going on. And actually what we know is if you can relax in that state, you've got a far better chance of dealing with everything. So instead of this kind of high stress, I've got to deal with this, because what that does as well is it only gives you access to a really small part of your brain. You can only access a tiny part because you're focused on that one issue, and almost everything in the external world that you notice goes through the lens of that small issue, and you can only think about that. And I know a lot of us will have been in the situation where we keep having the same repetitive thought over and over and over again, and that's your high beta state, focusing on that issue. But what you need to do is get down into this alpha state, because in the alpha state you can get access. When we see people in an alpha state and you're in a brain scan, all of the brain lights up instead of the really small amount that's lighting up in a high beta state. So that's kind of a pictorial representation of the amount of your brain that's conscious, your conscious mind, and then the amount that's unconscious. And in this unconscious part of your brain are so many resources. You just need to learn how to access them. They've got all your memories, they've got your imagination, you've got your intuition in there, which is really a thing. And you can access your beliefs. So your beliefs and your programming driving your automatic behavior. If you want to change any of that, you do that by accessing your unconscious mind. So how do you get there? Well, the really good news is that it's not only easy-ish, it's really enjoyable. And you literally do it by relaxing. And that's the beautiful thing. I used to lie down at the end of an exercise class, sometimes you get a few minutes to get, to just relax and just notice your body and breathe. It's that bit of the class, but that's the whole class. And, whereas you can have lots of different types of meditation, for me, what they're all really trying to do is get you down into this alpha state. And there's the more traditional types that you may have tried, or you maybe think that's what meditation is, which is kind of emptying your brain or having a mantra to repeat. Absolutely brilliant, incredibly difficult for beginners. incredibly difficult, and so many people give up before they've really got any benefits, because it's hard, because our brains are designed to keep thinking. So what I like to do with people, because I come from a hypnotherapy background, is guide people into that relaxed state, so it's actually genuinely really enjoyable. And you know, I have people saying to me, that feels like the first proper break I've had for months, because it's easy. You know, all you have to do is lie back and relax and listen to a voice and be guided into a wonderful state of relaxation. And then your brain gets used to doing that, and it breaks out of this high beta state and gets into this idea that you can, like me, feel stressed, recognize it, be aware of it, and then have a load of tools of knowing how to deal with it, because you get yourself into your unconscious mind and relax. So that's really all I wanted to say today. But I would really encourage anybody to try. There's loads of different apps, you know, there's loads of different ways you can do this. So don't think there's just one way and that you have to do it that particular way. You know, find a way that suits you. But it's my mission to try to help people understand this stuff and help people begin to look after their mental health. So, you know, do try. And I'd just like to thank Anita for inviting me to talk today, because, you know, it is my mission and I do want to get this message out there. So I hope you found it useful. That's who I am. If anybody's got any questions at any point, I'd love to answer them. I've got no idea, sorry, how long I've been speaking for, but I am going to stop now, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And I guess we'll do questions later, will we, Anita?
Yes, we're going to do questions later. So I think what we'll do is, if you want to all think about your questions for Madeline, or just pen them down quickly, or actually add them to the chat, we'll go through them in the chat afterwards. And I will now just remove the spotlight from Madeline and find Laura from Laura Clark Nutrition, who is going to talk to us all about how our eating habits influence our behaviours, and see if we can improve those as well. Good morning, Laura.
Morning, thank you. I've never been spotlighted before, so that's a treat for a Thursday morning to start half term. Lovely to see you all. As Anita said, I'm from Laura Clark Nutrition, and I'm a registered dietitian by trade. I've worked in the NHS for 15 years, and I've had a sort of consultancy side hustle for about 10 of those 15 years, and have been completely freelance running my own consultancy for the last 5 years. So I think I probably know enough about nutrition for 15 minutes. It is a very emotive subject, is it not? We all eat, and therefore we all have an opinion about what we should and shouldn't be putting in our body. And of course, social media complicates things rather, because there is a lot of what the professionals like to term nutribolics out there, as we try to navigate what is right for our health and our bodies. And certainly when I first trained over 20 years ago, people came to see me because they didn't really know very much. And now, of course, people know loads of stuff, but it all contradicts itself and doesn't make any sense. So they're sort of still seeking what's optimal for their health and their well-being. So we're going to delve a little bit today into it from a mental health perspective. And as I said, I suppose I've got 3 hats. So I work with people on a one-to-one basis. I run a lot of workplace health seminars, and I suppose my passion is to stop making this really dull and for people to kind of think, oh God, here we go again, healthy eating in the workplace, she's going to tell us about smoothies, which is this sort of the exact opposite, I suppose, of what I do. And I really like to bring to life, you know, that interplay between science, nutrition science, but also behavioural science as well. I do various consultancy jobs for the media and some PR campaigns, and I also support food brands. So if any of you have children, you might know the Bear yo-yos. They certainly feature quite highly in my life, and I am the nutritionist for Bear as well. So that's a little bit about me. As I said, food is such an emotive subject, and from a mental health perspective, of course, it has the potential to protect us, but it is also very much the way that we cope. And so whatever we're looking in that fridge for is not necessarily going to give us the answer that we want, is it? But we have such sort of polar opposite attitudes towards food depending on what's going on in the world for us. And as Madeline was saying, we don't have a particularly human relationship a lot of the time with our habits and our choices, and yet we still kind of think that we do, because we still think that this is a willpower thing, and we're very quick to judge ourselves, aren't we, and to think that we could have done better. But really, it's this dude behind the scenes that is driving a lot of our food behavior, because these decisions are quite primal, and they're particularly primal at times of stress. And so the willpower thing just doesn't really stack up when you're comparing ourselves to these sorts of quite complex adaptations behind the scenes. So let's just delve into that a little bit then. And Madeline mentioned the hormone cortisol and that sort of fight, flight response. And so when we think about it from a nutrition perspective, obviously cortisol is going to put in place a various sort of cascade of responses to enable us to survive. And the first of those is really increasing our appetite so that we can replenish those muscles that we have supposedly needed to engage to run away from said tiger. Obviously the tiger is now the laptop or the children. Actually, I'd quite like to run away from my children, but obviously that's not acceptable behavior. And cortisol will essentially drive up appetite, and it will drive our preference for sweet and fatty food. So it's not surprising that you know, when we're trying to be good, that we're reaching for the biscuits and the donuts and the red wine, and we're not reaching for the apples. And that's not because we're lacking willpower. That is because we've got that sort of primal drive to replenish our stores. And there is a role of genetics. We can see that cortisol does play a different role in different people's bodies. Some people are quite prone to cortisol, the effects of cortisol, whereas other people are less so. So there is a role of genetics there. And one of my passions, I suppose, on an individual basis is to actually say, we are getting very confused at the moment, and Boris is not helping the situation, around weight and health. And those two things are actually completely separate and should not be viewed together. So body weight does not determine health status. And the problem that we have is that we still believe that fundamentally, if we go on a diet and we put our bodies into quite a significant calorie deficit, that's actually a good thing and we're going to get healthier. And actually what we know is that calorie restricted dieting is another way in which we create cortisol release in the body, and it's particularly stressful. So it's not something that we should be doing, but that's not the message that perhaps we get coming out. And in the work that I do with people around mental health, most prominently, I would say it is actually looking at some of these issues that crop up when we are in a society in which the thinner body is favoured. There's a huge amount of stigma. There's a huge amount of disordered eating that goes on behind the scenes as a result of people trying to diet, when actually physiologically there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're fighting against. And we know that actually body image and self-esteem and self-worth and all of those things that it encompasses is a really significant issue for people. So that's a little bit of an aside, but there are in every workplace this, you know, there will be somebody, you know, who is battling with their weight and is trapped within that kind of diet culture that is, you know, worth the multi-million pounds. So effects of cortisol go to quite a deep level as well. So we know now that our microbiome changes as a result of cortisol, and this is of course become a huge trend recently to talk about gut health, hasn't it? And dietitians have always felt really comfortable talking about poo, but it's become more commonplace now that actually we can all start to have conversations about what our guts might be telling us, because we've realized the power of our bacteria, and we've got more bacterial cells in our body than we have human cells. So we should pay attention to them. We can see that cortisol over long periods of time will reduce our immunity, and it does alter our metabolism. And so actually that in itself can cause our body weight to change. There's been a huge interest in probiotics and prebiotics as a result of us looking at ways in which we can manipulate our gut health. And the research into probiotics is still in its infancy, really. It's a little bit of a scattergun approach. Your bacterial diversity is as unique to you as your fingerprint. So we're not at the stage yet where we can categorically say which probiotics you might benefit from. But the randomized control trials that have looked particularly at anxiety and probiotics are quite compelling. And as as Madeline was saying, around that sort of emotional center of our brain, where the nerve endings are firing quite strongly, particularly in those with diagnosed anxiety. In randomized controlled trials where they're given a probiotic, we can see that the firings actually decrease. So something is happening at a gut level, which is actually influencing what's happening in our brain. So it'll be fascinating to see where that goes. In the meantime, though, I think our focus needs to be on prebiotics. So in other words, this is how we're going to feed our gut, remembering that our gut bacteria eat all of the foods that we can't digest. 70% of our immune system sits in our gut. And as we've established, our gut and our brain talk to each other through the neurochemicals that our bacteria produce as they feed. So we've got to feed them. And a really good way to think about this is where you're getting fiber from in your diet. And the interesting thing is that we have about 1,000 different fibers. So we often think of fiber just being fiber, but actually there's multi types of fiber. And we often think of plant-based foods as maybe just being fruits and vegetables, whereas actually we can get fiber from all plant-based foods. So it's a good rule of thumb to have a think about how many different plant-based foods you eat a week, whether that's nuts and seeds or pulses and lentils or whole grains or fruits and vegetables or whatever it might be. And we are sometimes creatures of habit, aren't we? We go to the shops, we buy the same vegetables every week. We cook the same things every week. So just thinking about that diversity piece is really key, because our bacteria need to be diverse to protect us to the best of their ability. Phytochemicals is another word that we often hear. An antioxidant is an example of a phytochemical. We've got quite compelling research actually around berries, particularly around cognitive function and mood boosting. This is probably the reason why I force feed my 7-year-old blueberries every morning, because he can be quite grumpy. But we actually do have some really nice research showing that if we consume berries every day, it does help to boost mood and cognition. So definitely worth doing that. Frozen ones are just as good and cheaper too. This mental fatigue that we're all experiencing at the moment is overwhelming at times and is exacerbated by stress. And as Madeline was saying, we know that when we're in this state, we do not get that oxygen flowing to the front part of our brain, which is essentially the part that makes us human. And we're less capable of decision making. And so our brain has to protect us in that situation, and it does therefore revert back to our automatic thinking. And so I suppose it's a good opportunity to just take a step back and to think, well, actually, what is in my automatic then? What are these behaviours that I do that don't require any conscious effort? Are they serving me well? Are they helpful coping strategies, or are they actually just compounding the problem? So what is my relationship with wine? What is my relationship with exercise? Do I see that as a form of punishment, or am I actually thinking about its health benefits aside from what it might do to my body weight? Am I, what is my relationship with Netflix? And what is my relationship with that kind of strong bond that we have between certain eating behaviors and certain activities, such as watching television? So this is some of the stuff that I delve into in more detail in longer sessions that I run. But let's not beat ourselves up. Let's remember that automatic system is actually, although it's chimp-led and therefore quite primal, it is actually there to try to help us. But if we can do our little bit to help it back, then we're going to be in a better position. Creating friction is one thing that behavioural scientists talk quite a lot about. So habits that are so automatic, the more friction that we can put in place, the easier it is for those habits to start to form into something new. So an example of creating friction is literally perhaps the number of steps that you need to go through before you find that bottle of wine and open it. Starting small and tagging things on. So think about all of the behaviours that you do every day that don't require a huge amount of thinking. Showering, cleaning your teeth, putting the kettle on in the morning. And if there are other health behaviours that you can tag on to stuff that you already do automatically, then that can be a really powerful, helpful way to start. There's a massive assumption that people who seem to have it all sorted have loads of willpower. And actually the research shows that they're not really using it. That's the whole point. It's a finite resource. They're not using willpower. So much of it is automatic for them. So don't give yourselves a hard time. Start to change those thoughts that we listen to. And of course, that's where the work that Madeline does is so helpful, because it enables us to really tune into a couple of layers lower. What am I really thinking here? What are the beliefs that I'm holding? And are they serving me well? And above all, I think we need to start being a little bit kinder to ourselves, less judgmental, and approach our eating habits with a sense of curiosity rather than banging ourselves over the head because we perhaps didn't do as well as we could have done. It really isn't about the donuts, guys, okay, or the bacon sandwiches, you'll be pleased to hear. It's about the core of your diet and what does that ultimately look like. And the SMILES trial, I just wanted to end with, because it's a really powerful study that demonstrated this so well, because we get caught up in so many fads and so many mixed messages and, as I said, nutribolics about what we should and shouldn't be doing. But the SMILES trial was conducted on dozens of people who had diagnosed depression, and they were given guidance around a Mediterranean diet. And it was randomized controlled. So one arm of the study were basically given a cup of tea and a chat. And the other arm of the study were given a cup of tea, a chat, but also some quite sort of not regimented, but, you know, structured advice around food. And this is what the sorts of things they were told to do. So including whole grains, including nuts in their diet, including those unsaturated oils, having plenty of fruits and vegetables. But the diet did also contain fish, lean red meat, eggs, pulses, lentils. So nothing faddy here at all. And what they found was that they had a 33% improvement in their depression score as a result of changing their dietary measures. So the difference between those two groups was really significant. So it does have power, and if we can combine power and kindness, then we can get a long way down the line. But the essence of what I do is I've given you a bit of a sprinkling, but this is the kind of stuff that I love to get a little bit deeper on, getting to the heart of our habits and what makes us tick, exploring what change looks like for an individual and how they can achieve it, being holistic, but also being evidence-based, because nutrition notoriously is a very difficult science, and it's open to misinterpretation. And ultimately, my passion is to facilitate and empower people, whether that's an employee that you know or a person in your own life, to really consider what creates optimal health and resilience for them. So you can find out more about me here. I've also got, if you want to get any clarity around carbohydrate, I have a free ebook that you can download and a masterclass which delves a little bit more into dieting and diet culture, which you can also get access to. But yes, I'd love you to follow me, and I look forward to getting to know you all a little bit better. Again, no